Welcome to Just Asia, AHRC TV's weekly human rights program. These are the headlines. 8-year-old raped in India's Kashmir to intimidate community. Indonesian President Widodo does little for human rights in latest Papua visit. Human rights group reports Pakistan failing in human rights. Amnesty International report says capital punishment declining globally. Nepal hosts regional conference on human rights institutions. Urgent appeals from India and Indonesia. Welcome to AHRC TV's Just Asia. I'm Alexandra. This week, Just Asia begins with India, where an 8-year-old girl from Kashmir was gang raped and murdered. Her family reported her missing in January this year, and only a week later was her body found. According to the charge sheet filed in April, the girl from the Bakarwal Muslim community was gang raped and murdered by Hindu men, including police officers, in order to intimidate the minority Muslim nomadic community. The crime drew varied reaction from different quarters in India, including protests staged by Hindu nationalist groups against the arrest of the accused. The crime has showcased the very real fault lines in Indian society, along with another case in Uttar Pradesh, where a minor girl alleged that she was raped by a BJP parliamentarian. Her father subsequently died in police custody, allegedly due to police torture after he was jailed for an altercation with members of the accused family. Moving to Indonesia, the situation of human rights and development remains dire in Papua. President Joko Widodo has visited the province 8 times since his election in 2014. During his latest visit last week, President Widodo went to Asmat Regency, where earlier this year, some 100 Papuan children died from measles and serious malnutrition. During his 8 visits, President Widodo has never touched upon any human rights issue in the province, although he had briefly mentioned resolving all human rights issues in the province after the brutal shooting of 4 Papuan children in Pania Regency on 8th of December 2014, with 17 others injured by the security forces. Nothing has been done so far. The president is also reluctant to touch on past human rights abuses in Papua, such as the Wasir and Wamena case, the Apapura case, crimes against humanity in Pankak Jaya, the enforced disappearance of Mr. Aristoteles Masoka, and the murder of prominent Papuan activist Mr. Thais Hio Alue. The latest case of abuse in Daya Regency, a brutal shooting committed by the Pania Police Mobile Brigade, is also left untouched. President Widodo and his government have only given priority to the development of infrastructure and economy in Papua. This limited development focus is questioned by local Papuans, who say it does not increase their living standards, but rather foster the expansions of multinational corporations and mining companies. Until Indonesia reviews the presence and behavior of the security forces in Papua, frequent human rights violations will continue.
Pertama dia menjabat, waktu itu kasus Paniai pecah 2014, 4 orang ditembak. Tapi waktu Jokowi janji bahwa kasusnya akan diselesaikan. Tapi faktanya kan sampai sekarang kasusnya tidak terselesaikan. Jawaban-jawaban yang sekarang dia berikan, kampanye-kampanye soal pembangunan yang dia sampaikan, sebenarnya kampanye yang itu sangat tidak urgen sekali. Tidak urgen dalam arti bahwa hari ini orang Papua tidak butuh bahwa jalan yang begitu besar dan bangunan-bangunan yang tinggi. Memang tidak semua jalan kita tolak, tetapi ada hal-hal penting yang harus diperhatikan, misalnya soal penyelesaian pelanggaran HAM, terus pengurangan investasi di Papua. Investasi dalam arti bahwa investasi ini sama sekali tidak menguntungkan bagi orang Papua sampai saat ini. Misalnya soal perkebunan sawit, perkebunan apa, ini itu saya pikir itu sampai sekarang tidak ada, sampai sekarang tidak terlihat. Mungkin di media mereka banyak kampanye soal pasar sama jembatan jual tekam. Baru 2 itu soal jalan segala macam yang dikampanyekan, foto-foto segala macam semuanya sudah dibangun sejak 20 tahun yang lalu. Ya itu kelanjutan Jokowi, hanya tidak ada sesuatu hal yang paling signifikan yang Jokowi lakukan di Papua. Kalau untuk pembangunan memang dampaknya cukup luar biasa. Cuman masalahnya kan segregasi dari masyarakat yang tadinya komunal dipaksa menjadi konsumtif. Nah ini yang segregasinya sangat
In Pakistan, an independent rights group said Monday that the country has failed to make progress on several issues over the past year, ranging from forced disappearance to women's rights and protection of religious minorities. In its 296-page report, the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan says people continue to disappear for criticizing the military or the government, particularly bloggers, journalists, and activists. It also noted that the country's controversial blasphemy law continues to be misused, especially against dissidents and minorities. Minorities also continue to be targeted by extremists. And just one day before the report was released, gunmen attacked Christian worshippers as they left Sunday services in Quetta, killing 2 and wounding 5 others. Pakistan's government is reluctant to push back against religious zealots, and the report accuses the government of ignoring intolerance and extremism. At the same time, conservative groups continue to resist laws aimed at curbing violence against women, giving greater rights to women and reducing gender segregation. Press freedom is also threatened in the country, with many journalists attacked and news channels forced to close. Next, Amnesty International has released a report on the use of capital punishment globally, noting that fewer executions were carried out and fewer death sentences passed in 2017 than in 2016. The year also saw a reduction in the number of executions in cases of drug crime. While the report notes that the country imposing capital punishment in 2017 represent a shrinking minority. 23 of 193 UN member states, almost all executions carried out in 2017 were imposed in just 5 countries: China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Pakistan. As China treats death penalty data as a state secret, Amnesty International has not published estimated death penalty figures for the country since 2009. It is reported, however, that China executes more people annually than all the other retentionist countries worldwide. Also, unlike other retentionist countries that permit many levels of post-sentencing appeal, China usually executes people immediately after sentencing, or within 2 years. Amnesty reports that executions were carried out in China, Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia in cases where confessions were extracted through torture. Both Iran and Saudi Arabia impose mandatory death sentences for some crimes, execute juveniles, and fail to meet minimum fair trial standards. In Iran and Pakistan, blasphemy and insult to the Prophet of Islam are punishable by death. In Saudi Arabia, adultery can attract a death sentence. Iraqi law permits capital punishment for kidnapping. Of ongoing concern is the use of the death penalty in drug cases. 15 countries implemented or imposed capital punishment for drug crimes in 2017. Iran executed more than 200 people convicted of drug offenses. Next, Nepal hosted an international conference of human rights institutions from April 9th to 11th, at which the Kathmandu Declaration was anonymously adopted. The national human rights institutions of various South Asian nations agreed to uphold the international standards agreed upon by states to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms of the people. Representatives from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, the Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bhutan participated in the conference hosted by the Nepal Human Rights Commission. NHRIs from Jordan, Malaysia, Myanmar, Mongolia, and the Philippines also participated in the event along with a broad range of human rights organizations and journalists from the South Asia region. The United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the United Nations Development Programme, Kathmandu, and a number of international human rights organizations also participated. Finally, the Urgent Appeals Weekly features 2 cases from India and Indonesia. In India, Salima Memcha, a human rights activist is facing harassment and intimidation from the Manipur police. Salima is seeking a probe into the alleged fake encounter killing of her husband by the Assam Rifles. Her case is part of a wider campaign of abuse against human rights defenders, particularly those who have challenged armed security personnel in the region. In Indonesia, 3 police officers responsible for the death of a suspect in custody are being internally disciplined with light punishment, rather than being prosecuted in a criminal court. That is all for this episode of Just Asia. For more on these and other issues, please visit www.humanrights.asia or www.alrc.asia/justasia. Thank you for watching and see you next week.